All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Consulting Growth Hour. So nice to see all of you here. We're going to get started on the dot. Thank you all for coming. And today, as you know, we have Mark Stiving of Impact Pricing. We're going to be talking about what should I charge? Strategies for consultants in the age of complexity. Pricing is one of the most asked for topics. I see it in my business as well, with a lot of my consulting clients wanting to know more about pricing and especially in the context of how things are changing. So I'm super excited, and I hope you are as well. Just before we get started, and before I introduce Mark, I just want to share with you what Consulting Growth Hour is, because I know that there are a few of you here who are joining us for the first time. So Consulting Growth Hour is a bi-monthly series. When I say bi-monthly, it's twice a month. Series of sessions, 60-minute sessions like this one, where I get together with a bunch of consultants and talk about one specific area of growth. So in January, we talked about strategic foundations, building a plan. February was positioning and messaging month. March was revenue optimization, and pricing was part of March, but I got a little busy, so we're having a follow-up pricing discussion in April. So this month, April, we're talking a lot about prospecting. If you came to the previous session, it was about how to build a referral engine. Next month is going to be all about sales, mastering discovery skills. June is about technology, automation, AI. July, time and productivity. August, advanced client acquisition. September, when fall comes around, how to leverage possibly the best buying season of the year. So a lot of fall growth strategies. October, making consulting offers. November is expanding client partnerships, strengthening bonds, and expanding your value within the existing accounts. And December, we'll close it out with a reflection and planning and preparation for 2026. So for those of you who are interested in joining these sessions and even getting replays, right, including of this session, go to bit.ly/consulting growth, and I have a free community called Consulting Growth Hub. You'll have all the replays of these sessions, and you'll get notified of future sessions as well. And we've done about 60 plus. I think this one's the 66th session. So there's lots of good ideas that many other consultants like you folks have benefited from. So go ahead and do that. I'll also pop this link in the chat, but it's bit.ly/consulting growth. All right. So for today, we have Mark Stiving. Mark is, I'm going to read this bio out for the benefit of our audio podcast listeners. So Mark Stiving, Ph.D., is the founder and chief educator at Impact Pricing and a renowned expert in pricing strategy. With 25 plus years of experience, he has helped hundreds of, somebody's asked me for apologies. So he's helped hundreds of companies, including Cisco, Procter & Gamble, and CrowdStrike, boost profit through value-based pricing. Mark works closely with private equity firms and their portfolio companies and is the host of the Impact Pricing podcast. He's the author of several acclaimed books, including Selling Value, which I've read and I absolutely love, and which we'll dig into, and the upcoming Context-Driven Pricing. So you can learn more at impactpricing.com. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Fahim Musa. I'm the founder of Consulting Leap. I'm a former management consultant, and through Consulting Leap, I help independent consultants and management consulting firms to build a sales and marketing system and build a thriving consulting business. So without further ado, let's start the conversation with Mark. Mark, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Fahim. This is going to be interesting and fun. Ask hard questions. That's all I could say.
Well, you know what? I read your book, Selling Value from Cover to Cover. So I'm sure any question I ask, you're gonna know the answer like it's the back of your hand, which is what I'm most excited about. I love speaking with authors of thoughtful books and just digging in. So before I get into all that, Mark, I wanted to ask you this. Like, you've obviously, worked with tons of businesses on pricing strategy, and so on. What is the biggest pricing mistake you see, especially in professional services firms, and why is that?
So without a doubt, the single biggest mistake that people make is they don't understand value to the customer, right? That book you read, Selling Value, is all about defining what does value mean to our customers. So if I were to take that directly to professional services or management consultants, I would probably almost modify that and say we charge by the hour instead of by the project or the value we deliver. And once again, it's because we don't understand the value that we deliver to our customers.
Right.
Value is a really hard topic to know what it means. And I think I defined it after I wrote that book, Fahim. So you haven't heard my newest definition.
So I think I mean, I've heard you say this before, and I'll have you say it, on your own, because I follow your newsletter. So why don't you define value for us? Like that word is so it's so like, loaded. People say create value, add value. I mean, it's almost become so cliche. But tell us about value. What does that even mean? How do you define it?
Yeah. So it's so funny because I would be on LinkedIn and talking to my all of my pricing colleagues and hey, how do you define value? And we've got, a half dozen different definitions that we argue about and say, oh, this is the definition of value or this is the definition of value. And it's really hard. So I've come to a single definition, which is value is the result of solving problems. So I'm going to say that again. Value is the result of solving problems.
Okay.
And I find that really powerful because most of what we do is we want to deliver results to clients. Now, if you're in management consulting, that means that you are a B2B salesperson, right? So you are selling to other businesses, and the result that matters to other businesses is incremental profit. That's it, right? So value in B2B, value is measured in incremental profit.
Right. Yeah. You know what? I thought you were going to say value is what the buyer is willing to pay, because I guess swear I thought that I read that in one of your articles. But I'm happy to dig into the result of solving problems as well, because that's um, uh, in your book Selling Value. You've really enunciated exactly this.
Yeah.
But talk to me about why you changed the definition, because I think that like I said, I think it was you who said um, value is what the buyer is
Yep.
willing to pay. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so I used to use that as my definition of value. Absolutely right. And why did I use that? Because in B2B, I could think of value as how much more money did I make you? And so that would be one definition of value, right? Because I'm going to make another $1 million because I hired you, it's worth $1 million. Not necessarily what I would pay you, but I would get that much value. On the other hand, in B2C, how much value do I get out of having this shirt? Right?
It's hard to quantify, right?
There's no incremental profit here. And the
Hmm.
only number I could possibly put on this is willingness to pay. Right? How much would someone pay me for this? And so I use this definition of value means willingness to pay for the longest time. And by the way, that's part of why I had all these arguments with pricing people is oftentimes they would look at value as incremental profit, or they would look at value as incremental profit coming from differentiation. And all of these are good terms. I have nothing against any of those, but that's why I switched away from saying value is willingness to pay. Now, we're going to talk a little bit later, possibly about my newest book that I'm working on called Context-Driven Pricing.
Hmm.
And in there, context-driven pricing actually has a really simple definition, a really simple strategy, and that is charge what a buyer is willing to pay. And so I was able to pull willingness to pay back in a different strategy because willingness to pay is really important. So let's go back to the $1 million example. So I'm going to go make a customer, I'm going to make one of my clients $1 million. Are they willing to pay me $1 million?
Probably not.
No, of course not. Right. So what would they be willing to pay me for that? And that's what we as pricing people really care about, right? I want to know how much are you willing to pay me? I don't care if it's for a shirt. I don't care if it's for $1 million incremental profit. How much are you willing to pay me? And so we want to start thinking about that willingness to pay as a really important concept as we go through pricing. Now, that takes nothing away from value because value is huge. Value is the result of solving problems. Most of my willingness to pay comes from the fact that you're delivering value to me. Most of my willingness to pay is because you are solving my problems. And
Right.
so we want to understand value really, really well.
Yeah, there's so many things to unpack there, but I'll start with this, Mark. So you said value is the result of solving problems, but as salespeople, we tend to sell things before the result, right? So it's more like it's perceived value, and then you got to like create the perception of that result, of the result that you're going to get the buyer. So that's one piece. But I want to just dive into what I feel a lot of folks would benefit from on how to quantify value, because I just want to say to the audience also, like, just type in the chat, let us know what type of consulting you do, what function of consulting you work in, and who your customer is. So when you know, as we move through the conversation, I can look at the chat and hopefully we can talk about some examples. But Mark, going back to the question, I think what a lot of folks would benefit from is to understand how to quantify value, because there are different types of consultants, like leadership consultants, consultants who do culture, strategy, branding, and so on. And a lot of these topics could sound nebulous. I know they're not, but they could sound a little nebulous. How do you quantify, the result of providing a service? So I'll let you start from wherever you can on this topic, because I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So first off, I want to say that chapter 4 in the book Selling Value is my favorite chapter. It's probably my favorite chapter I've ever written in any book. And that talks about something called value tables.
Mhm.
And here's what a value table is. Think of it as having 4 columns. Those 4 columns are the solution, the problem, the result, and the value. I'll say those again real fast. Solution, problem, result, value. Now, I put solution first. If I were doing it chronologically, I would have put problem first. But I put solution first because most companies think about their product first. Most companies think about their features first. And so think about a feature that you deliver. Think about something, a capability that you have. This is a solution that you have and you want to sell, you want to offer your customers. You deliver that, you built that because it solves a problem for a customer. Can you articulate what that problem is? And can I say, of all the things that I do with my clients, that's the hardest for them to do, right? Articulating the real problem that they solve for their customers, because we tend to have what's called the curse of knowledge. We know so much about what we do that isn't it obvious that when I segment your market, you're going to make more profit, right? Well, no, that's not obvious to everybody. It may be obvious to me or to you, but we've got to actually articulate the problem in a way that resonates with our customers. So you built a product to solve a problem. Once you solve that problem, I'm sorry, let's assume that a customer has that problem and you solve it for them. What's a result they might achieve? Now, that result in the world of B2B, which we work in, is a KPI. What's a KPI that you're going to move for your client? And there may be lots of them, right? But what's a KPI you're going to move? And then given that you're going to move a KPI for your customer, then how using business acumen, how much more profit does the customer make if you move that KPI from, A to B? And so we could use business acumen to help figure out that true value in terms of profit to our customer. So if
Got
I
it.
were measuring value to a customer, it's clear out there at the far right column, how much more profit am I delivering to you? But I can't get there without going through all of those steps.
Right, right. Yeah, so this is an important concept. I encourage those who are listening to, if you're interested in the concept of value, to pick up Mark's book. It's what I've been reading lately, and I've for the second time because I read it last year as well. And he's got this concept called a value table. And so let me just paraphrase, Mark, what you just said about a value table. So the intent of creating a value table is to quantify value, right? And you said that a value table must be divided into four columns: solution, problem, result, and value. So you start with a solution because you started a business and you created a solution, so you start there. And then you define the problem that you're solving. Following that is the result, which is the KPI, and then what that value is. Now, I know this is a little abstract, so if you don't mind, let's do a couple of examples, Mark. Let's do an easy example where it's easy to quantify value, like growth or sales. And then let's do a tough one based on some of the consultants in the room. I saw a couple of examples. I think it was, and thank you, by the way, for those of you who are typing in the chat. I think it was Anya who said that she has a brand consultancy. So I want to understand, I want to see if we can do this for, a sales growth consultancy or a strategy consultancy as well as a brand consultancy, if you don't mind, Mark.
Yeah. So first off, I don't even remember the chapter number. I apologize, Fahim. There's a chapter where I talk about value conversations.
Right.
So a
We'll come into that one.
yeah, value conversation is how you have this conversation with your customers. And the only reason I want to bring that up now is because when we define value, it's not the same for every customer.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we want to do is try to figure out how different customers value the things that we do differently and potentially price differently. But even if we charge the same price, we would find different levels of value to justify the prices that we're charging. And so we want to make sure we're thinking through, hey, we've got different customers who get value in different ways. So let's assume I'm a brand consultant. And so as a brand consultant, what's the number one KPI that you think you would move? Go ahead and type this in the chat. What's the number one KPI that you think you would move for your customer?
So I think it was Anya who said that. Go ahead and type in the chat. But we can also, I mean, I worked in brand strategy before. So the number one KPI for a brand consultant, okay, I think she's typed it in.
Brand recognition.
Okay.
Oh, someone else.
Awareness.
Awareness.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with awareness. Um, so we're actually going to have to come back to the issue that says value conversations
Mm-hmm.
because awareness doesn't drive profit, right? Now, maybe it does. So maybe I could ask a client, so how do you measure awareness today? And they say, oh, we do these market research studies of, unaided recall or aided recall. And I say, okay, great. What's your answer? What do you have today? And we have 2% unaided recall. What would you like to get that to? We think we could get that to 4% unaided recall. Great. So if we could move it from 2% to 4%, what do you think that would do for your business? Right. So what
Right.
I'm looking for are what are the metrics that are going to start to drive profitability?
Right.
That's what I really want to find. And so even if you, uh, I'll save that for the next one because you're going to ask me an even harder one in a minute. Um, and so if the client says, hey, we go from 2% to 4% awareness, then that might take my new customer sales from, 1 million a year to 2 million a year.
Right.
Doesn't impact my existing customer sales, but it certainly would impact new customer acquisition. Right. And so we start to look at what's the profitability that I get because I was able to move awareness from one point to another point.
Right.
Now, here's the real question. Here's the thing that we never did is we never said, what's the problem that awareness solves? Right? What's the problem that having a good brand solves? And sometimes the problem is obvious enough to people that we don't have to articulate it. But sometimes we really want to articulate the problem because that's what resonates with our buyers. And we go out and um, um, we talk about the fact that I can improve your brand, right? And
Mhm.
to us, that means, oh man, more people are going to be aware of what you do. And no one's sitting around thinking, hey, I don't have awareness,
Yes.
right? What they're
People are
thinking, I don't have enough sales,
sales or it's profit, one of those two, right?
right?
Yeah.
And when what we have to do is we have to say, well, what's a problem that resonates with them that we solve with our brand studies, with our brand consulting, right?
Right.
And so here's a problem that we solve. So maybe maybe the word awareness would articulate with them, would resonate with them, but maybe it's we're not winning enough new customers.
Mhm.
Maybe it's there's not enough lead generation going on. Right? And so these are problems that truly resonate with me, where awareness is kind of the solution to the problem.
Right. And then you've taken that awareness, which is an abstract concept, and you've kind of tied it into, okay, what does awareness get you? Right. And then you talked about, okay, those are the KPIs. Awareness will get you this much whatever the brand metrics are. If you get to go take your sales from 2 to 4%. And then you've got you kind of quantified it, right? So I think that in any area of business, you can ask the right questions and get you can sort of quantify the result. Like a lot of the times, I see this in leadership consulting as well, and I see this in HR consulting as well. Any leadership or HR consultants in the house, just type in the chat. So in leadership, people would go in, a consultant would go in, and they would kind of, train some managers, or they would do some executive coaching, or they would, do some conflict resolution um, um, coaching or consulting. In HR, they would, put together people strategy, etc., compliance, whatever it is. And those two things, sometimes it's hard to measure, but I think that everything, even though they're like they're not hard sales or efficiency operations consulting, they lead to some kind of KPIs. So for example, leadership could lead to better decision making, which is better employee engagement. Which would then lead to retention, and then you can quantify that. Similarly with HR as well. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about that, Mark, about quantifying various types of results in business.
Yeah, so there are some things that we do which are unquantifiable, and we have
Mhm.
to find a way to quantify them, right? And so the one you just went through was a great example. So let's assume that I could increase employee satisfaction, right? So someone says to me, "Hey, my employees aren't engaged. They don't work as hard as they should." So these are problems that I might be able to solve. And so if I solve those problems, what might they achieve? What's the KPI I'm going to move? Well, the KPI that they tell me that they want to move is we measure employee satisfaction, and right now we've got an NPS of 3, right? We really need it to be somewhere around 60. How do we do that? And so I can't put a I can't quantify NPS, right? It's not truly measurable for me. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean, but I could say the words. So if we could increase NPS from 3 to 60, what else would that change in your company? And they go, oh, well, that would reduce retention. I'm sorry, that would reduce turnover. Um, awesome. Glad we're going to reduce turnover. What do you think? What is it today? Oh, turnover today is, 3%. What do you think we could get it to? We could probably get that down to 2%. Excellent. Right. So now we just quantified something that matters. And I call this peeling the onion. So you're going to
Mhm.
hear some really weird phrase that says, hey, this is what I want to measure. This is what I want to improve. And you're like, yeah, but I can't put dollars around that. Right. So if I could improve that, what else does that do? If I could improve that, what else does that do? And we keep peeling the onion until we get to something that, oh, that makes sense. right? We can all see where the money comes from when we do that.
Right, right. And also there's one thing I want to, add over here is that sometimes the challenge also is quantifying something, a result that is long term, right? A way in the future. Like, for example, strategy consultants struggle with this. Like, you create a business strategy for a client, maybe it's a 3 year or a 5 year plan, and help them think through their challenges and create this uh, this brand new strategy for them. And that becomes difficult as well to quantify because it's so way in the future. Do you think of you know short-term results versus long-term results in while thinking about value?
You can. Here's the way I think about it. How is your customer measuring the time frame? Right? What time frame is your customer using? So let's assume that I'm going to make you $1 million a year. Does that mean I make you $100 million over the next 100 years? Probably not, right? You're not thinking in that 100-year time frame.
Mhm.
But if you're using a 3-year planning horizon, I'm about to make you $3 million. If you're using a 5-year planning horizon, I'm about to make you $5 million. And so, what's the planning horizon my customer is using? And that's the way I'm going to think about the timing. So, if I'm a CEO of a company and I'm thinking about strategy and how I'm going to implement it over the next 5 years, I now have a 5-year planning horizon. And
Right.
we can talk through that 5-year planning horizon. If I'm a COO and I'm trying to improve productivity on my factory floor, I've now got a 1-year planning horizon, or maybe a 3-year planning horizon. And so
Right.
now we're speaking in terms of the planning horizon that our customers are using.
Yes, it's about what they use, and it's about context in that drives this entire process, right? So yeah, I think that's just that was very helpful. Obviously, this is a topic that is quite technical, and we're just kind of scratching the surface of it. And you explain it really well in the book with lots of different examples. So um, that I would encourage people to go check that out. The book's called Selling Value. But Mark, let's talk about this. Like the issue that I think most people, and when I was reading the book too, I had this question, and then you answered it in the next chapter. So I'll ask it now. I think a lot of people must be maybe asking this question: how do you get your buyers who are flying by the seat of their pants? They're busy. How do you get them to sit across the table and give you all of this nuanced information so that you can then help them quantify value? And this is an exercise typically a salesperson would be doing the exercise so that they can kind of um, show the buyer what the value is, so that in the end the seller could charge a percentage of that or whatnot. So it can be a little awkward to get all this information, and especially if they're hard numbers, KPIs of the business, and you don't know the salesperson from Adam. How do you kind of invite a buyer into a value conversation and do it in a way that they want to do it themselves?
Yeah. So before I answer the question, I just have to tell a really quick story. So I was working with it was actually a really good friend of mine, and he was in consulting, and I kept saying, look, you got to stop pricing by the hour. You really have to charge by how much value you're delivering to the customer. And he came back to me a little while later. He says, Mark, I'm having such a hard time with this. I'll sit down at lunch with a potential buyer, and they ask me how much I charge, and I say, I really don't know. I have to figure out how much value I'm going to deliver to you first before I can tell you how much I'm going to charge. And I'm like, no, you don't get to do that. So for him, what I had said was pick a number. I don't care what it is, right? Pick a really big number and say, look, I charge $500 an hour. By the way, I don't like charging by the hour, but that's beside the point, right? Pick a really big number. I charge $500 an hour, but let's see how much value you're really going to get. Because if you don't get as much value as I think you should, we could probably bring that down a little bit.
Okay.
Right. So that's a different conversation. We never want to say, hey, I want to know how much value I'm delivering so that I can pick your price. Right.
Okay.
It just doesn't make sense. So here's what you want to do. First off, understand that you actually don't know how much value you're going to deliver to a customer. right? Before you walk in the door, there's no way for you to know the answer to that question. And by the way, your customer doesn't know how much value you're going to be able to deliver to them. They just have no idea what the answer to that is.
Mhm.
And so the only way to figure out what value is to have a value conversation. And the
Right.
way I would approach that is to go to a potential buyer and say, I'm relatively expensive, but I tell you what, why don't we have a conversation to see how much value I'm going to deliver so that we can figure out if it's worth it for you guys or not.
Right. I think that's so smart. Like you say, um, first of all, you say, okay, I charge $500, but let's have a conversation to see, the value that I can bring. And if we find that you're not going to get the required amount, the right value, we can bring that price down. So it's about them, right? We want to see, we want them to know that this exercise is about showing them how much value that they can get, because buyers, they don't do this exercise on their own themselves. They don't even know what the value is of not doing anything, the cost of the status quo. They don't know what the value is of bringing in an outside expert, etc. So it's actually a super valuable discussion for them. They're going to take something out of it, in that conversation itself, right? So
And let's assume you're not talking to the CEO for a second, right? You're talking to anybody below the CEO. They need someone else to approve this purchase. How are they going to get that approval? Well, the way
Mhm.
they get that approval is by saying, here's how much money I'm about to make the company when we invest in this. And that's exactly what a value conversation is.
So it helps the champion in the organization, your champion, to um, you know, talk intelligently about why they need to do this. They've got the numbers, and typically for a large engagement, there's probably a CFO involved in there somewhere. There's a procurement department involved somewhere, and so they go in with a thoughtful analysis of what um, um, a solution could bring them, right? And also the other thing that I think that you mentioned in your book is about having them, you know, give you the numbers, never suggest how much value a solution or even a feature could bring in. So it's about, having them give you those KPIs, give you the numbers, so then it's their solution, it's not yours.
Exactly right. If you've probably all seen or used, or maybe even you have and try to use for your clients, an ROI calculator. And I am not a fan of ROI calculators because we don't believe them, right? So if you've ever done an ROI calculator for anything, it said you're about to make a 10,000% return on investment. And you got done with that and said, yeah, I don't believe it. Right. And so we just ignore those because we know they're not real. But if instead, pretend like you know what the ROI calculator does, it's in your head, and you're able to ask questions, not to fill out the fields, but just ask questions to guide the buyer to creating their own ROI calculator. What you just did is made it so that they believe everything they just did.
Mhm.
It's much more believable.
Right, because it's their work, and it's a collaborative exercise, right?
Yep.
And like you said, like different buyers value different things. So how can you have a standard ROI calculator for every single buyer, right? So that obviously they wouldn't believe it.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, that helps a lot. So I come across, and by the way, just before I go into the next piece, can I request you folks, all those of you who've got your video off, I'd love to see your lovely faces. Put your video on, and also we're going to go into Q&A in a little bit. So think about some questions. You can either put them in the chat, or you can come on directly and ask Mark your questions. I think this is a great opportunity that we have him here. So I encourage all of you to think about a question or two. So what I what I've noticed a lot in especially with folks in the IT consulting world, the guys or people who do digital transformation, IT consulting services, um, in that world especially, and it's prevalent other places as well. Buying by the hour is what is prevalent. That's the culture. And then also it's not, I can't even you can't even blame them, because in IT consulting or in software consulting, scope keeps changing. You hire a consultant, they'll build something, they'll show the minimum viable product or whatever it is, then the scope changes and they go back and do it again. So, having a value conversation in this context, I was just thinking about it, having a value conversation in, before the engagement, how would that work when the scope itself keeps changing? Any thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, so the problem, what you're really asking me is the issue between hourly pricing and project pricing
Right.
when the project is relatively unpredictable, right? When the scope is going to change. Now, by the way, sometimes the project is unpredictable because we don't have enough experience to know how long does it take to do this project.
Mhm.
Sometimes the project is unpredictable because our customer keeps changing requirements, right? I'm actually in the middle of remodeling my kitchen, and if my wife changed her mind about the cabinets in the middle of the remodel, that would cost me a fortune, right? And so when they change their mind, it becomes expensive. So here's the answer to the question that I would probably give is, can I first off, I want to do a value conversation. I want to know how much value we're going to deliver to the client, to the customer. And I'm probably going to say to my customer something like, the requirements that you've given me today are probably not what you really want. So we've built into this project 3 upgrades, 3 revisions, 3 whatever it happens to be. And so we're going to go through those and say, look, let's see what it takes. Is this right? Is this right? Is this right? And you can do that because you've done this enough times, right? You know
Mhm.
typically what it is that a client
Right.
wants. And so now, by the way, don't say 3, say up to 3, right? You can have up to 3 changes until we get this the way you really like it. This is typical for what my clients want. And then when they hit that third mark, because they're one of those really particular clients that just, it's like everything has to be changed. Then you say, okay, great, let's rebid this because we want to figure out what it's going to take to get exactly what you need, exactly what you want.
Right. So you go in, because you've done this before, many times, you go in understanding, okay, here's what typically a project like this would entail. So let's just go and kind of use that experience and say that up front. And so you give them these different options and you price that in. Um, a lot of the times in now IT as well, like when I speak to IT consultants, the world of IT is changing so rapidly, especially because of AI, and the world of software is changing. AI is now writing software. Junior software engineers are no longer required, and so on. And a lot of consultants I work with, a couple of them actually have said to me that clients are asking them. They're saying things like, if it takes, if it takes you less time, why should I pay you more? Right. I know that a lot of the things that you mentioned already takes care of um, this question, but are you also seeing, because I know you work with a lot of larger companies, are you also encountering this whole run-in with AI with your clients? What's the general discussion on AI and pricing that you're seeing?
So I don't have that problem because AI doesn't know the pricing frameworks I know yet. If anything, I deliver way more value because of the fact that I use AI using my frameworks to help my clients.
Mhm.
So I'm delivering them way more value than they would have gotten before. And I actually spend more time because I never would have done that before. Right. It's just
Okay,
that now I can and
fair
it's
enough.
easy. Right. Um, but I don't sell time. Right.
Mhm.
I sell outcome or results. That's what I'm after. And that's what you want to sell. There's a really important concept. I'm sure it's in the book Selling Value. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it is. And this concept is called Will I and Which One?
Mhm.
So, will I and which one is a really important concept for us to think about. Will I is, am I going to buy something in this product category? So, since we're talking about IT consultants, let's just say, am I going to hire someone to write this code for me? Right. So, that's the will I decision. And the way I'm going to make the answer to that decision is, well, if I have this code written, how much more money am I going to make? Yep, I'm going to make $1 million, and I think I can get it for less than 100,000. Yeah, I'm going to hire someone to write this code for me. So I just said yes to the will I decision. The next decision I get to make, though, is which one? Which one am I going to go buy? So which person am I going to go hire? And so if you're using AI and you're much more effective, that has nothing to do with the value that you deliver to the customer. However, if your competitor is using AI and delivering the result to the customer, and they're only charging half what you charge because they're spending less time, they're willing to come down on price for their own results, then you have no choice but to compete with that customer, with that competitor, right? That's the issue that we're dealing with. So what I always do when I think about pricing is I think, what's the decision that my buyer is about to make? And so my buyer, if they're saying, do I need to hire someone to write this code? The answer is yes. And they always come to me, they never go anywhere else, then I'm probably not lowering my price. Right? Maybe I'll lower my price a little bit because it really is taking me way less time and I want them and they asked for it and I want them to think that I care about them and I don't want them to go searching for other people to write code for them. Right? So maybe I'll do that. But the truth is I don't have to. Right? One day they're going to decide, hey, let's go make that which one decision again. And now I'm probably going to lose because I haven't brought my prices down.
Right. And also what's interesting is that if there are competitors that are willing to lower their prices just to get business and because they're using AI or whatever, and if they're willing to lower their prices, it comes down to a differentiation issue. It becomes a strategic issue, right? Not just a pricing issue. You've got to think about as a business how you differentiate it. I love the way you defined differentiation in the book. It's just really opened up a lot of insights for me. You said, I'm paraphrasing here because I can't remember the exact quote, but you said that differentiation is not about how what features, what different features you have. Differentiation is about, creating meaningful change for your buyers that your competitor simply can't. Right? It's not just about how cosmetically different you are. It's about doing something that your competitors can't. So that even before a pricing issue, it just becomes a business strategy issue. How are you different from all the other folks in the market?
Yep. And so I'll say what you were trying to say, using my words, if that's okay. Right. And that is, remember the value table, right? Which was solution, problem, result, and value. So you can think of that as what's the value of solving the problem. In the world of differentiation, you have a feature that's different than your competitors. Guess what? That feature solves a problem. Solving that problem delivers a KPI, which has value. And so differentiation isn't necessarily about what are the features we have that are different. It's what's the problems we can solve that our competitors can't solve. It's what are the KPIs we can move that our competitors can't move.
Right.
It's
And
what's
so, mhm.
I was
No,
just gonna say,
no,
it's what's the dollar value of that. That's the thing that really matters in the world of differentiation.
yeah. And so the value table exercise also, I mean, it also it's an internal it's like a it's an you get to introspect about what you bring to the table as well. And I think a lot of sellers don't do it, right? Like it's first of all, there's no framework for it, like unless they've read what you've done and what some other pricing experts have done. Sellers don't think about that. So it's a good introspective exercise to even just think about those four columns and put some numbers and quantify what you bring to the table.
You remember, um, I forgot what I was going to tell you. It was so important too. Okay, maybe I'll remember later. Go ahead.
For sure. Okay, you can go think about that. I'll just tell folks in the audience, if you want to ask a question, just use that little hand raising thing on Zoom, and you can either come on and speak with Mark, or you can, just type it in the chat, whatever it is. I think this is a great opportunity for you to just clarify anything regarding pricing in the context of your consulting business. And I'll be happy uh, to listen in and learn from you folks as well. Um, as people are thinking about their questions, Mark, let's talk about your upcoming book, Context-Driven Pricing. I know you've written a few articles on this. You briefly talked about it, at the beginning of this session as well. Talk to us about context-driven pricing and what drove you to write about this topic.
Yeah, I already said what drove me. It's the fact that I couldn't agree with all of my pricing colleagues on what the
Right.
word value meant. And we all live and thrive on this concept of value-based pricing. We all love value-based pricing, and I take nothing away from that at all. But it just doesn't capture all of the information we need when we think about pricing. And so I created or started thinking through this concept, and I said, well, pricing is really about willingness to pay. And is when you start to think about willingness to pay, then you start to think about all the different times that really matters to us. And so we tend to think of different market segments, and we tend to think of different products that I might offer, or my product portfolio that I might offer. And we tend to think in terms of price segmentation and how do I charge one customer a different price than I would charge another customer. And we think in terms of behavioral economics and how do I present price so that it's more attractive than if I present it a different way and I get people to pay me more. And all of these things are relevant to how do I do pricing? How do I think about pricing? And when I captured and I thought through that entire process, it really comes down to context, right? What's the context that my buyer is in? And so market segment is actually a context, right? What's the type of problem they're trying to solve? And so we start at this really high level of market segmentation, and then we go down to what's the product portfolio look like for that market segment. And so you could think of that as what's the scope of the problem they're trying to solve. And if it's a really big scope, they're probably buying my best product. And if it's a really small scope, they're probably buying my good product.
Mhm.
And then we can take the next step down and say, well, what's the price segmentation layer? So what's the specific problem, the urgency that they're dealing with right at this moment? And how would I do different pricing because they're right in this moment? And each one of those are these different layers of context that truly matter to our buyers. And those are huge decisions we make as companies, right? So can we think through those decisions really clearly and create strategies to say, how do I do my market segments better? And then for a given market segment, how do I craft my product portfolio better? And then for a given product, how do I set my price segmentation strategy better? And so each one of those is really simply saying, can I truly understand the context that my buyers are dealing with when they're making a purchase so that I can make great business decisions, including pricing?
So just so I understand this concept a little better, and I admit I'm a little lost right now. Could you give me an example, like within the context of any type of consulting?
Can I
Um,
do it outside of consulting? Because I got a great example for you,
sure, go
right?
for it.
And then if you want, we'll deal with consulting. We'll try to apply it to consulting. But how much should Uber charge?
How much did Uber charge?
How much should Uber charge, right? So it's
What?
almost impossible to answer that question.
Mhm.
The answer is it depends. So what does it depend on? So it turns out, first off, at the highest level, it depends on what's the type of problem we're trying to solve. So Uber solves three different types of problems. They have three different market segments. One market segment is us, right? We want to take a ride to get from point A to point B. One market segment is Uber Eats.
Mhm.
One market segment is Uber Connect, where they actually deliver Amazon packages, right? So they've got three different types of problems they solve with their cars and drivers. Each one of those is a different market segment. Take any one of those market segments. We're probably most familiar with Uber People, I'll call it, right?
Mhm.
Delivering people. I'll take any one of those market segments. They've crafted a product portfolio for that market segment. In the world of Uber People, we know they've got UberX and Uber Rideshare and Uber XL and Uber Comfort and Uber Ski in Reno. I've seen ads for Uber Teen lately. So they've crafted a product portfolio for Uber People. Now, take any given product, let's call it UberX. And how much do I charge to get Mark from his house to his airport, to the airport? Well, not only does it depend on how far the drive is, but it depends on how many drivers I have on the road.
Yeah, supply and demand. Yeah.
It depends on how bad is the traffic between Mark and the airport, right? And so these are all contextual issues that say, how much should I charge Mark for that ride? And so we just walk through those three layers of market segment, product portfolio, price segmentation for Uber.
Right. So that's a B2C example, right? So even in B2B, I mean, again, like it comes down to value, right? Like different customers have different value. You can segment the market, you can segment based on various kind of characteristics. And then again, you price based on value. So it's kind of the same. I mean, it's a similar, very similar concept.
It's the exact same. You
Right.
want me to do the same thing for LinkedIn?
Of course.
Because
Go for
because
it.
LinkedIn is B2B, right? In the world of LinkedIn, they've identified four different market segments. The four market segments they've identified are recruiters, salespeople, job seekers, and professional, which is all the rest of us,
Mhm.
right? You take any one of those. Let's say you go to LinkedIn and you say, "Hey, I am a recruiter. What are my packages? What can I buy from you?" And they've crafted product portfolios for recruiters. By the way, they charge 10 times more for their recruiter packages than they do for their sales packages, right? Because there's so much more value to
Right.
recruiters than there are to salespeople. Then you can take the next step down and say, okay, Grant, now let's take a look at the individual situation that a buyer is in and saying, oh, you guys are, on an urgent push to hire 20 people this week. Okay, here's the price for you.
Right.
You guys are long-term customers and you're doing one a quarter. Here's the price for you. Right? We could look at different characteristics of customers and saying, oh, we got it. This is the price that we're going to charge you.
Right. And then, there's obviously um, in terms of the features, a person that buys the recruiter package will have some minor features that they get, but essentially it's the same platform, right? Like a lot of the information is the same. Like I'm a subscriber of Sales Navigator. I know what I get. I know I mean, but when you see someone that buys a recruiter package, I didn't know it was 10 times how much a Sales Navigator a subscriber would pay. It's quite a
Yep.
lot. But it's almost the same thing. But then it comes down to differentiation again, right? LinkedIn, there's nothing like LinkedIn out there. Like they've got all the data, right? People, there's no other competing B2B network. So they actually have a product or a platform or a service that they know that none of their competitors can match. So
E-
it's a strategic thing.
Even if there was competition, they would still do this, right? Because their competitors would probably do this.
Right. Got it. So we have Katie. Katie has a question. So why don't you just unmute Katie and just so for all of you here, let's get to the question fast and so that we can hear from other people as well.
Make it really hard, Katie.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, did you ever study psychology? Because there's a lot involved in this. I'm looking forward to reading your book. And I guess the question is, given in this country, in the US, what's going on with the markets and the White House doing what they're doing, how does that affect everyone's ability to have these conversations with these very real things going on and sort of a destabilization in this country?
Well, I think for most of us, it doesn't impact the tariffs themselves don't impact our businesses as management consultants, right? So we're not going to have to charge more because of tariffs. But what does end up happening is that our customers, especially if we're dealing with a hardware type company, our customers are probably dealing with tariffs. And now the question is, how is it that we're going to guide our customers to get through this whole tariff question that they're trying to deal with? Because they're trying to make decisions not only on pricing but on sourcing and what's their logistics channel going to look like, what's their product channel going to look like. So I don't think it matters as much to us. I could say that I rarely think about it until I'm coaching a company that does hardware, and then we specifically talk about the tariffs and the situation that they're sitting in, as opposed to how do they set prices, right?
Thank you.
Right.
And psychology, have you studied it?
So I have a PhD in marketing, and in the world of marketing, we study a field called behavioral economics a lot. And behavioral economics is essentially psychology applied to business.
Nice.
And so my dissertation, if you care, my dissertation was on 99 cents, right? So does 99
Wow.
cents work and why does it work?
Wow.
And so that was pretty fun. I do a lot of good, better, best, which is very psychological, behavioral economics type concepts. When we talk about how do we raise prices and how do we communicate price increases, those are very behavioral concepts that say, look, how do I
Mhm.
communicate a price increase without pissing off my customers too much?
So Mark, the good, better, best thing. So you have you offer three prices. I imagine that's what it means. A good, better, and best, like what these SaaS companies do. Do you think a professional services firm should offer something like that so that if they don't take up the like the better or the best, you can downsell them to the good. Have you seen uh, cases like that?
Yes, absolutely. You should. If you can put together a proposal that's got three different options in it, so the good, better,
Mhm.
best, you'll increase your win rate, right? And B, you'll probably upsell more business. So here's the way I tend to think about it is I'm gonna put together a good package, which I want if especially if I'm in an RFP situation, but I want it to look as affordable as possible. I don't really want to sell it, but if I sold it, I'm happy doing it. Right. I put the better package together saying this is what my client really needs and wants. And I price it fairly, probably a little bit high just because I like pricing high. And then I put together a best package. And the best package, you could think of this as an advertisement for everything you do that's amazing, right? That would apply to this customer. And so now a customer looks at your best package and says, "Oh, you're able to do that? Oh man, I'm going to go with these guys. I'm not going to buy that, but I'm going to go with these guys because they're really good. And they know what they're doing." And then sometimes people buy your best package. You didn't expect it, and you make a ton of money because they bought your best package.
Right.
So,
Mark.
so if you think, and I understand why people think this way. So if you think in terms of how much money am I making per hour, approximately for each one of these packages, your hourly rate should be going up as you go from good to better to best. Now, I am not saying charge by the hour. What I'm saying is, as you price it, if you're thinking, oh, this will take me 10 hours, this will take me 30 hours, this will take me 50 hours, your hourly rate should be going up as you go from good to better to best.
Right, definitely. And so, Mark, I got to say that you are the best package. Mark, thank you so much for being here. This has been so enlightening, and um, I was happy that I got to speak to you after reading your book, so I could like dig in more. There's so many questions in my head. Just before we log off, if people want to find you, Mark, where do they go?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. Feel free to find me there. You can email me if you'd like, mark@impactpricing.com. Try not to make it look like spam. So say something like your presentation, because I get tons of spam and we end up not reading much of it.
Right, there you go. So Mark at impactpricing.com. Just before we log off, folks, if you want a replay of this session, join the Consulting Growth Hub. It's my free community. You have not only this session, but tons of other sessions as well, and lots of value for consultants. So that's I've typed it in the chat. It's bit.ly/consulting growth.